now it's time for Electronique with Mark Dynamix.
Electronique.
Welcome!
Electronique.
Hello and welcome to Electronique New Wave and Synth Pop, where we play the best 12-inch mixes from the 80s and 90s. I'm Mark Dynamix. One of the most prolific remixers in the world, having turned his hand to over 800 remixes, and they're only the official ones on Discogs, and having a decades-long radio show, hundreds of compilation CDs, and of course his own compositions and releases. Originally from the Netherlands but now residing in Canada, we welcome to the show Mr. Ben Liebrand. Ben, thanks for joining us here on Electronique.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
It's so great to have you on the show, especially Electronique, because we focus on those great 12-inch mixes from the 80s and 90s, which you were so much a part of. I'm interested to know how you got started and how old you were at the time. What was the trajectory into radio and studio work?
It was basically the following. Right from the beginning, the very, very beginning was me just hanging out in a club where we used to go with our friends. And the club also had an open day on Sunday where it would open in the afternoon and play it would continue into the night. And there would not be somebody between 6 and 8 because the DJ would go for dinner and it was just somebody behind the bar flinging on some records. So I said, would it be an idea if I put on some stuff? So I got into the DJing by accident. By then I already had a huge interest in music and equally the technology behind it, like tape recorders, audio equipment, amplifiers, speakers, and that kind of stuff. That was in 1978, so I would have been 18 at the time. I did already extend some. I remember extending LTD, Back in Love Again, from 2 7-inches, but the mixing started later. That started in 1980.
And of course, you got involved in radio very early on as well. So, your radio show's been going for, 30 years now, something like that?
It's from 1983, so it's a hell of a long time.
38 years on radio. You still love doing it?
Yes, and the nice thing also is that people still love hearing it. So it's still among the best listened hours on a Saturday night on Dutch radio. So I'm very fortunate to still be allowed to do that, to still be able to do that. So the radio station it's broadcast on is Radio 10. And Radio 10 can be found on the internet.
Let's flip back to the 80s, to the early 80s, and you were doing edits on tape machines, reel-to-reel machines for your early remixes, for your extensions for the 12-inch. One of the early ones I know was Fun Happy Station, and you've talked about this on your website before, where it was just thousands and thousands of little tape cuts chopped together. Do you want to give us a bit of a story around that one?
Yeah, at that time I was already collaborating with a Dutch label called High Fashion, and they had this group from Italy, and they had a track out called Happy Station, and the record company asked me if I could do a special version of that. So I took the track, and a lot of editing going on, a lot of sound effects in the intro, and also what sounded like scratch patterns. But the scratch patterns back then, they were actually done with a Korg MS-10 synthesizer. So although it sounds like a rhythmic scratch going on, it was actually 3 sequences of this Korg MS-10, which together sounded like this scratch pattern. So I just made this remix and I just chopped it to bits mercilessly, and When the thing was done, I got a phone call from the record company if I could do a radio edit, a shorter version. Something which I did not know at the time was they asked me to do the radio version because the girls were coming. They were actually on the plane heading over to the Netherlands to do a performance on Top Up, which was the most popular dance show on Dutch TV back then. So what I did is I took the 12-inch version. I basically made an edit from all the madness together in a 3.5 minute edit, not knowing, not realizing, not being aware of that only hours later the girls from Italy had to play back on a version, on a crazy chopped up, messed up version which they had never heard before. So I really put them in a bit of a spot back then, and it took them a couple of years to forgive me for that. I mean, it turned into a big hit. And it kind of had the result that people now had their ears pointed at Italo music. Which was great, and which turned into many successes for Fun in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands also kind of being a gateway for a bunch of other countries regarding, looking at what was going on in the Dutch charts. It made them European hits, so it made them a European success. So, yeah.
I'm very interested to know from a technical side how those tape edits were put together on reel-to-reel tapes. I mean, you had to measure out a beat, cut the tape, make multiple copies of it, and then splice it all back together the way you wanted it, and then run it through the machine. Is that basically how it was working?
Yes. The thing was that way in the beginning, I just had a Revox B77. And being a nerd right from the start, I realized that the Revox B77 was great to do the edits on, but not quite up to par with what came from the studio. So back then I would request 5 copies of the 7-inch version, 5 copies of the instrumental version, 3 copies of the outtakes. And I would then splice together from original studio recordings all the bits I wanted to be together. In that way, ensuring that the final result would still be 100% studio quality. If you go onto YouTube and type in Ben Liebrand Happy Station, you will see a video of that original tape with all those original edits being played on a Studer A80, so you can see all of them flying by. Measurement was done. The tape was running at 15 inch per second, 38 centimeters per second, which was the majority of the masters were made at that speed. And when the tape runs at that fast speed, then it from one beat to the next, it covers quite some distance. And then if you have it's called like a grease pencil. And if you have a grease pencil and you are very careful with marking the tape and very careful with editing the tape, then you can maintain the original tempo over many edits, as long as you are really precise with all the marking and the editing of the tape.
Absolutely fascinating. Let's have a quick listen to Ben's edit of Fun Happy Station right now. That's Fun, Happy Station, the Ben Liebrand 12-inch mix. We are talking to Ben right now here on Electronic. And Ben, I want to talk to you about your Phil Collins remix that came out in 1988 of the classic In the Air Tonight. How did this come about?
Right. In the Air Tonight was one of the mini mixes I made back then. And by the way, I'm still making those mini mixes for Dutch radio. The mini mix was an item in a very popular radio show on Friday evening, played at 2 tracks after 9 o'clock in the evening. And that meant that every Friday morning, after I got up and had my breakfast, I had to come up with an idea of doing a particular mix for that evening. So that morning I decided to do In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, which meant making an edit which would accommodate for all the extra bits I wanted to put in there, syncing up the track, making a new sync track using a Roland SBX sync box, providing me with a stream of SMPTE timecode, which would then lock onto my sequencer and enabled me to sync up drums, sync up bass lines. And throughout the day I would work on such a mini mix, and I would make one every week. So by the time my time ran out, because that would be the deadline, the time ran out around about 8 o'clock in the evening, after which I would have to do a real-time mix down of the mix. And I would jump in the car and I would have an hour drive to the radio station, and the mini mix would be played. A couple of weeks or maybe even months later, there was a DJ convention, a DMC DJ convention in London. And some of the guys who were doing remixes for DMC did a DJ set at the Hippodrome, and the Hippodrome accommodated some over 2,500 DJs that evening. And Tony Prince asked me, do you want to do a DJ set? I said, well, I think I would like to play some of the new mixes, some of the new stuff I've done, one of which being In the Air Tonight. So I played the track, and when the track was finished, I took the microphone and I told 2,600 DJs, if you want to have this released, call the record company. So next morning, a little afternoon, I think it was like half past 12, I get a phone call from Virgin Records in my hotel room in London. And picture this. This was also in a time that people did not have mobile phones. So how this went about with that morning, many of those 2,600 DJs calling Virgin Records in London, them trying to find out who is this Ben Liebrand guy, them then trying to find out where the heck is this Ben Liebrand guy, finding the right hotel I am, finding the right room, and managing to call me at 12:30. Mr. Liebrand, we've been hearing stuff about this remix you have made. Can you come in? So I went into Virgin Records with that same tape, the same tape I made that day for the radio station, and I played them the tape, and that is how Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight in my remix version got released, and it got me a silver disc, which is hanging on my wall, because it also meant another top 5 hit for Phil Collins in that year.
Fantastic. I love the little piano flourishes you put over the top, and of course the extra bass line and the drums as well. What did Phil think about it initially?
The thing with Phil Collins is that Phil is actually quite a relaxed guy, and creatively he is very much set on, to put it into a metaphor, to lay his creative egg, if that makes sense. And once he has laid his creative egg and he's totally satisfied with it, he really, if it's done well, doesn't mind other people turning it into an omelette. And so basically, all the remixes, obviously, all the remixes that got released are released with the artist's permission. And I'm very fortunate that Phil Collins was one of the artists that had no problems with the artistic approach to the remix and the quality of the final product. So it got released with his approval.
And such a great idea, Ben. I mean, you're double timing the percussion, the drums in it, and turning it into a laid-back dance track. I mean, it's quite fascinating, really.
And the nice thing, which is also one of the forces that makes me do remixes, is that I try to open up an additional audience to a track. So Phil Collins obviously is in the pop rock category, and by doing this remix, it opens it up to the dance floor, opens it up to a complete new set of audience. And that audience, many in that audience might be the first time that they experience something from Phil Collins, which might also bring them to the rest of his catalog. So it basically is a win-win situation, making these remixes, and for myself, keeping in mind that, a remix, first of all, should open it to a new market, and second of all, should be at a quality level that it deserves a place to coincide next to the original. So it's not meant to replace the original. It's not meant to, discard the original or make a claim that the original isn't as good. I only aim for it to be of such a quality that it deserves a place next to the original.
Well, let's remind ourselves of Ben's 88 remix right now of Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight. Electronic Radio with Mark Dynamix and Ben Liebrand on the phone. We just played Ben's remix of In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. Ben, in 1990, I acquired a copy of The Eve of the War, and this was actually my first introduction to your work. I heard the Phil Collins remix much later on. Were you approached by the record company to rework this track, being really a classical soundtrack piece, or was it an idea you had already completed for a mini-mix?
Exactly the latter. This was again a mini mix, and the idea to do this mini mix actually came about whilst on a barbecue with the colleague DJs of the radio station, and it turned out great. And by then I had great connections with CBS. CBS was the record company that held the original version by Jeff Wayne, and so we discussed what we're going to do with this version of Eve of the War. I was like, I don't know if I want to put my name on it as an artist, because that would kind of lock me into this, and I don't know if I want to be locked into this. But not forward thinking enough, because we kind of made the stupid decision to make the artist name Ben Liebrand Remix. If you look at the cover, it doesn't say Jeff Wayne Eve of the War, it says Ben Liebrand Remix Eve of the War. And obviously the track is written by Jeff Wayne, but this was a new version, say a cover version, which used samples of the original with approval of CBS Records at the time. But the artist name being Ben Liebrand Remix, it caused a hell of a lot of confusion. So much even that when the track got released in the UK, they very conveniently spliced the original video clip to my version. And from that point on, the confusion was really complete, because even Jeff Wayne was under the impression that it was a remix of his version, and plonked it on one of his own best-of CDs. So the paperwork was not the problem, because I had the approval of CBS, and it was in my contract that indeed I was allowed to use the samples. And when Jeff Wayne called CBS like, hey, what's going on? I now figured out that this is not one of my tracks, but somebody else's tracks, but they're using my samples. I literally could refer them to my contract, Section 7, subparagraph B. Ben Liebrand is approved of using this sample, and CBS kind of took care of the extra override that needed to be paid to Jeff Wayne. So a bit of extra paperwork and a lot of confusion, and was started off as just an idea for the mini mix.
Let's have a listen to it now. Yeah, this is the Ben Liebrand remix artist of The Eve of the War, the Deep Space mix, right here on Electronique.
No one would have believed in the last years of the 19th century that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. Across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans. gulf of space, they drew their plans against us. Abruptly, the sound ceased. Studies creatures that swarm, multiply, and drop water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, they drew their plans against us.
Electronic Radio, that is the eve of the war, the Ben Liebrand remix. Ben's on the line with me, and Ben, I wanted to ask you, your album Styles came out the same year, 1990, as Eve of the War, and showed, just as the title says, a wide variety of styles, genres and production. I'm curious, do you have a favourite style when producing, or is it kind of open slather to try anything and see what happens in the studio?
I kind of refused over the years to be classified as a house DJ or a disco DJ or whatever. So Styles was my way of exploring different venues. And at the time, CBS suggested, shouldn't we do an album? And they wanted to put Eve of the War on there, but they also wanted to put out, they also wanted to include Bill Withers' Lovely Day, and Ram Jam, Black Betty. So basically a best of Ben Liebrand remixes on CBS. And I said, well, it's a nice idea, but if I have a chance to do an artist album, I'd rather have it not to be a compilation album of other artists, but stuff I do myself. CBS gave me carte blanche, so I could do whatever I wished, and it included Move to the Big Band, which is a rap track with Tony Scott, and it included Carol Kenyon with a swing feel low tempo track, a soulful track. It included an up tempo track with CJ, Give Me an Answer, and even a Spanish track which I made with one of the most talented guitar players in the Netherlands, Jochem Fluitsma, who also appears on my later Iconic Groove album. Yeah, it was just a way of expressing the different directions and the different influences that I had when growing up, when my own career started, and that's how Styles came about.
the single lifted off it, moved to the big band. I'm going to play the jazz mix of it because it's really interesting. You must have had a whole band come in and do those separate parts.
The thing is that what you hear on this track, say the whole horn section, is actually 5 players. It's two guys playing trumpet, 2 guys playing trombone, and 1 guy playing all the saxophones. But what they did, we recorded different takes, and the different takes were recorded with just 5 players, but each subsequent take would feature those 5 same players, but with a different trumpet, one of their different trumpets. So in the end, you hear a full big band played, but it was only 5 people in the studio back then.
Let's have a quick listen to it now. This is Move to the Big Band, the jazz mix from Ben Liebrand with Tony Scott on vocals. Ben Liebrand.
Blow the horn, so let the rhythm control your body. As a J-double-C, hip-hop, S-Y-L-E. Hey, let's get around, it's a new thing we bring in. You'll be surprised, a new thing fulfilling the wishes you thought about this morning when you woke up. A new day, some fresh juice, then you hear this dope stuff. You feel the groove, the next thing you move. Thinking about stopping, then won't do. Cause the rhythmic bomb combined with the big band, it stands for the master plan, the dance stands creating. On the tip, you keep waiting for the bonus. It takes you to the place with the blowing horns. Ha ha, yo, we rolling. It's about time for you to get stupid on this. Hip-hop combined with a jazzy flavor. You know you got to move to the big band. Move to the big band. Just like in the old days, the band playing live, the people filling the place with a dancer feet to keep tapping, swinging around while the hands are clapping, dancing and dancing. You walk around a place that it's time for romancing, feeling great. Hey, you have the time of your life, fill the glass with champagne. Come on, cause we're about to go on. Check out the bass tone, I hear the drum beat roll like this. You shouldn't be missing it. On the street, the crowd, you keep listening. Ready, the party, the party, the party. The place is on fire by this hip-hop combined with a jazzy flavor. You know you got to move to the big band. Move to the big band. Yo, fellas, check out the ladies, they're waiting for you when it's dropping. I'm crazy, sitting on the chair but cannot sit still, dressed like a princess. It's time to ill. Yo, Jazzy, why don't you take a chance? Yo, Jazzy, you know it's time to dance. Dance to the rhythm that I know you like. You dance to the rhythm, make you feel alright, like this. The classical tune is back again. Back to the fact the real horn swing. While the beat is rolling pump and the crowd is thinking about how to make a move on the record with a jazzy sound. Move around along the sea while you're waiting for the right moment. You listen, we playing the music. Coming from the bandstand, here we go. Listen to the big band. Move to the big band. The big band.
Electronique.
You're listening to Electronique with Mark Dynamix.
Ben Liebrand still with me on the line right here on Electronic. Ben, let's jump forward to 2015 and the release of your most recent album, Iconic Groove. Tell us a bit about how that came about and some of the vocalists you work with, because I see Tony Scott is also on this album. He's just got such an iconic sound, hasn't he?
Yes. How it came about was actually, I had a couple of gigs in Holland. I flew to Holland and I had coffee with a very good friend of mine, Armin van Buuren. You know, a lot of people know Armin van Buuren as, obviously, for all the stuff he's done, but I got to know him in a different way, in a different setting. So we're friends. We're first friends. I mean, we can spend a week together and we could talk about anything and everything, and music might not be even one of the topics. So went for coffee with Armin on a Tuesday, and I actually expressed to him, it's such a shame that I couldn't work this trip out to coincide with the Amsterdam dance event. He said, what do you mean? He said, you know, if I would have been a week earlier, I could have gone to the Amsterdam dance event. But, you know, it kind of didn't work out. And such a shame. He said, dude, I think you missed a week. You're kind of, you know, got it wrong by a week, because the Amsterdam dance event is now. It's this week. So I was sitting there. You're kidding me? He said, no. He said, oh, would have loved to go. So this is the little backstory to Iconic Groove. So Armin, he just made a phone call. And at 10:30 in the morning, I was having coffee with Armin, and at 12:30 that same day, I was in one of the panels at Amsterdam Dance Event. All it takes is a phone call from Armin, and I, without having planned anything, kind of experienced a week at Amsterdam Dance Event. And as I didn't have planned anything for that week or for the particular days or whatever, I just tailed along with Armin. I just followed, you know, whatever he was doing. I would just go along, and it would be a very nice distraction for him as well, because it meant that he would have someone with him that's a friend. And, you know, we could talk about all kinds of stuff, and it would not be somebody who's like, ooh, Armin, and can you tell us about the last album? Can you tell us about the next album? And he has too many of those questions. So we had a great Amsterdam dance event, and Armin is he's one of the nicest guys in this music industry. He really is. Everyone we met, Armin was like, hey, and I'm sure you know Ben Liebrand. So I got introduced to so many people that knew me by name, but had no idea what I looked like. And I had so many compliments of so many international artists and international producers, which I didn't even fathom that they even knew my name. I was like, this is so cool. This is such a, I don't know, almost a kind of a revelation to me, because I was never fixated on keeping in the limelight and being in the picture and making sure that, you know, I'm around and blah, blah, blah. But this really cemented for me that, yeah, I mean, if I put an album out, if I make an album out, there are people interested in what I am doing now. Yeah, so that was the inspiration, with a big thank you to Armin van Buuren for, you know, me tumbling into this coincidental week of Amsterdam dance event.
Okay, let's get into your grand 12 inches compilations. I've been a collector of these since the start. We're now up to, 17 volumes, and each volume has 40 tracks or more. It must be a massive task. And then, of course, there were dance classics compilations that you were involved in before that on Arcade. Is there much more left in the vault of this period to remaster and release on your forthcoming compilations?
The thing is that the reason for me to start this series was actually a sad occasion, because it was me working on a grand mix and requesting the master from the record company, and then I found out that the record company didn't have the masters. So the record company has all the rights to a track, but if you call them and ask them, okay, well, can you send me the wave master? They don't have it, which was such a truly flabbergasting experience back then, and I'm talking about 2001, that I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a master? I said, well, we have an archive, but it's too expensive to send people into the archive, so we're not using the archive anymore, and we've discarded the archive. So it is mad, and that urged me to first of all save all the masters that I felt needed saving. And if you go back to Grand 12 Inches Part 1, it has Donna Summer, it has Georgia Moroder, it has Gino Soscio. So it wasn't just a disco era, it was all about a track being a grand 12-inch. Not even necessarily disco, not even necessarily pop, new wave, or not even necessarily being bound to a certain time period. Just the only thing it should be is a grand 12-inch. So that being the reason why Grand 12 Inches has started, it is a nightmare because it really is a nightmare. And I mean people are looking towards a series and considering it with such simplicity, making an episode of this series. But imagine this: you have to find the record company that has the rights now. And that's not necessarily the record company that had it back then. Then, once you've had that, you have to find the master, because they won't have it. Experience over the last 20 years has taught me that there is only a handful of companies that paid any attention to their archive. Most of them just haven't. So it means that a couple of things have to coincide. Within the time frame you want to release this thing, you have to find the people that own the rights, and you have to find the master, and it has to come together. And so there is still a whole bunch of tracks where either one or the other criteria is met. So either we found the people that can allow us to use the record, but we haven't found the master yet. And on the other side, we have masters which we have found, but it is not clear who has the rights of the records. For example, Taboo and all the stuff by Alexander O'Neill, it's still not clear who is authorized to license that. And it's difficult. It's just such a difficult process to come up with a new release. And every release still leaves dozens of tracks which we are aiming for, but which we can't get because either the one or the other, either the permission can't be found or the master can't be found. So there is still a lot to put out, and there is still a lot on our wish list. It's a task each and every time.
One of the things I love about the compilations is that you put your liner notes for how the condition of the master when it came to you, what you had to do to it, if you had to make any edits to clean it up and bring it up to scratch. All of those are for each compilation on your website at Liebrand.nl. I find them really enlightening, being a studio technical person as well. What are some of the weirdest formats you've received tracks on for compilation licensing? I mean, there's reel-to-reels, of course, but is there anything really out there that you were just like, wow?
Well, there are a couple of stunning revelations over the years. So one being that a lot of record companies, they just have an MP3, and it's a mess. I mean, the number of masters I've been able to give back to the record companies because they didn't have a master themselves anymore, that's astounding. And the other thing which is astounding is that nowadays it gets a little bit technical, but nowadays you're able to record in 24-bit 96 kilohertz at fantastic quality. So people think like, transfer the tapes now with this new technology and it will sound absolutely stunning. The thing is that so many tapes, through whatever reason, they are just not fresh anymore. So people would love to have everything analog and would, rave about the magic of analog. But the reality is that a tape which was transferred in the 80s, just on 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz, sounds better than that same tape now being transferred 24-bit 96 kilohertz, because simply the recording was fresh. Several tapes come to me that way, where I was so excited of finally finding the master tape in an archive, and it turns out that the tape just wasn't usable anymore.
Well, we're going to play some of those tracks from the latest Grand 12 inches 17 on the show. I think we'll flick into Ram Jam, Black Betty. That was one of your remixes from 1990. People, you can grab Ben's Grand 12 inches 17 compilation on CD. It's a 4 CD pack. It's on his website, so go and check that out. Some of the previous editions are there as well. Ben, it's been fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for dropping by on the show.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
We look forward to some more releases from you in the future and your Grand 12 inches series.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Electronique.
Electronique.
This is Ben Liebrand in the mix. Music non-stop. 21st century.
Non-stop, techno pop. Music non-stop, techno pop. Boing, boom, cha chong chong. Boing, boom, cha chong. Boing, boom, cha chong chong. Boing, boom, cha ping ping. Boing, boom, cha. 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 Boing, boing,
Schimmerndes Neonlicht.
boing,
Und wenn
charging our battery. And now we're full of energy. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. We are the robots. Я твой слуга, я твой работник. Я твой слуга, я твой работник.
Discovered by Madame Curie.
By Liebrand in the mix.
Sie ist ein Model und sie sieht gut aus. Ich nehme sie heute gerne mit zu mir nach Haus.
You've been listening to Ben Liebrand's Kraftwerk Megamix, and a big thank you to Ben for supplying us with that and having a chat to us right here on the show. That's it for another week. Mark Dynamix signing off. I'll catch you next week. Bye for now.
Electronique.